let's get into it. This weekend, we are playing the LSU Tigers, who fired their head coach. And they played a game this past weekend against Alabama. So this is not their first post-firing game. That would be that game, which they played 20-9, which I still think didn't cover the spread. It was, yeah, 10.5. So Alabama technically still covered. So I would have been on the side of thinking LSU had a shot to cover here just because, they're in a spot where post firing, a lot of those times you just have the motivation, especially for a guy who I don't think had a great reputation amongst even his players in Brian Kelly. But Alabama is a phenomenal football team and they're at home. So this is a spot where I think they're going to maybe be a little redemptive and have a good outing. But we'll start with them. Just a couple notes, just for people that aren't following them as closely. But Kelly was fired. Their assistant head coach, Frank Wilson, is now their interim head coach. I think they fired their OC earlier in the season and swapped him out for a guy named Alex Atkins. And the defensive coordinator, Blake Baker, has been there and is still continuing to be there, even amongst the firing of Kelly. Right now, they're a team that's 5-4, 2-4 in the SEC. But I will say, all four of their losses are against current top 13 teams. So that's Alabama last week. That's Vanderbilt the week before, which ultimately got Kelly fired. Or A&M, which got Kelly fired, Vanderbilt the week before that, and then Ole Miss. So these are all four teams that almost are making the playoff. Three of them definitely right now, and so that's a tough spot to be in. Really tough schedule. And the Vanderbilt game, the A&M game, which was at home, and the only one at home of these four losses. So three of these four losses are on the road. I don't think a lot of people you looked at the schedule at the beginning of the year. You saw Clemson; they were able to beat them. Clemson's obviously nothing compared to what we expected them to be. Then they play LSU as the fourth team in the country on the road. And I think a lot of people would have probably picked Ole Miss maybe at the beginning of the year. It depends on what you thought of Simmons. But if not, LSU was a common pick for most people. Ole Miss looked better than we expected. They ultimately lost that game. Beat South Carolina, play Vanderbilt on the road. Diego Pavia's got them humming. They lose that game. Both of those by one score. And then the A&M game comes. This is what gets Kelly fired. It's a home game, but nobody expected A&M to be the third team in the country. They were, and they got absolutely run out the gym, run off the field, actually. But then post Kelly firing, play Alabama, and you lose that game as well. Now, if there was anybody paying attention to the Alabama football game, you noticed that Nussmeier came out of that football game. Michael Van Buren played, even post-injury from Nussmeier, because if you saw the play, the guy Nussmeier pulled out, brutal play. But Van Buren came in and continued to play. According to Wilson, it looks like both quarterbacks are possibly playing this football game. Nussmeier was it seemed like the guy who he's leaning towards and is going to play the bulk of the time still, which I would expect. I don't know which one I'd rather have. Nussmeier at this point has just had a really underwhelming season. I think a lot of people that were high on LSU thought he could be a potential Heisman candidate. And obviously, the NFL, a lot of people thought he could be a potential number one overall pick. That's far from the truth now at this point, and he's a guy that's just trying to really salvage what he has left of his college career and get drafted as high as he possibly can. When we look at LSU from an offensive perspective, it's going to start with those two quarterbacks. But alongside of them, you have their starting running back, Caden Durham, who really didn't do much these last couple weeks. And they've kind of had Harlem Berry really be the takeover guy as of late. And then at the receiving core, it's been a mixed bag. These are guys that were expected to do a lot better. You have Barry and Brown transferring from Kentucky, Xavier Thomas, who was here last year, Nick Anderson, a guy come in from Oklahoma, Trey'Dez Green, who's their tight end. And a lot of these guys have just not performed as well. And that's really been the story of this LSU football team, but especially on the offensive side as well. So this is a team, they're at home, so I think that's going to really benefit them. But I don't anticipate just a flurry of points. If you look at their last 5 football games, the last time they scored more, they haven't really – actually, I'm looking back at their entire schedule. They've not scored more than 25 points but once this season, and that was against Southeastern Louisiana. So, and all of their FBS football teams, their high is 25. Now, if any team's going to give you your season high, it's going to be the Razorbacks, and I anticipate – you'll see my prediction later, but that's anticipating exactly what I think is going to happen. So, right now, 25 is their season high. They're a team that averages about 24 points per game, so that Southeastern Louisiana game is doing a lot of weight for them. But this is an offense that's just been really underperforming, and I don't know if Michael Van Buren is going to be really beneficial in that, how much playing time he's going to get, but I expect to see both of these quarterbacks playing. Van Buren more of the kind of dual threat guy, and then Nussmeier that pocket quarterback. And then on the defensive side, I mentioned the defensive coordinator, Blake Baker, who's been a pretty good defensive coach. You look at them and how well they've done this season defensively. They've only given up two games that they've given up more than 24 points. That's Vanderbilt and that's A&M. In fact, their first 4 games of the season, they'd only given up 10 as the max. The last 5 games, essentially the 4 games they've lost are where they've given up more than that. And I anticipate that to be their better side of the football. This is a defense that's really got a lot of names on it. You have Mansour Delane and AJ Halsey, who are 2 transfers that are playing in the backfield that have really kind of upped their draft stock and been really impressive. AJ Halsey from Houston, and then Mansour Delane from Virginia Tech, 2 impressive defensive backs. And then in the middle of the field, you have Harold Perkins Jr. and you have Whit Weeks. These are 2 guys that are hoping to get drafted this year, or either I think even Weeks can come back. Perkins may be the same way. I know he's had some injuries. Yeah, he can also come back. But those have been a lot of their strong suits. It's been their back 7 to me rather than their front 7. But even when you look at their front 7, just a couple guys that I've just looking at as players that have been really productive for them this season. You have a guy, funny enough, and I guess he's technically in both because that linebacker position takes over both of them. But Wes Weeks has been really impressive. He was ultimately able to come back, and the brother of Whit Weeks, and he's really had a good season this year. Jack Pyburn, one of the defensive ends for LSU, has done well as well. But Delane, Halsey, Patrick Payton, I know is a guy that some people really were high on. The defensive end transfer out of Florida State. He has not been very productive this season, just 1 sack on the season, and he has played in all 9 games. So a couple of guys to know on the defensive side of the football. If you look at them just from like some team totals and averages perspectives, they're averaging about 240 yards passing, only giving up about 200 yards defensively. But rushing is kind of the other story where they're only getting 101 rushing yards per game. They've not been a very good rushing team this season. And then defensively, they're giving up more, and that's 126 rush yards per game. So this is a team that also hasn't been very productive on the sack side of things. They haven't given up a lot of sacks, as they've given up 19 sacks over 9 games, so about 2 a game. They've only had 18, so about 2 a game as well. So this is a team that the defense is more impressive than the offense, kind of like the Auburn game, but it's on the road. So that's a little bit to know about the defense and offensive sides of the football for LSU. Just a couple other notes that I was looking through as I was doing research for this game. I've mentioned this stat a couple times with the last teams we played, just because Auburn and Mississippi State have been really struggling in the SEC, but the 2 teams, Arkansas and LSU, have combined for 1 win since September 20th. So that was almost 2 months ago, a whole 1-9 combined between those 2 teams since that date. LSU was the number 9 team in the country. What a fall from grace. They are now at 5-4 and just 2-4 in the SEC. Looking at the last 10 matchups of Arkansas and LSU, we have only won 2 of them. Funny enough, both of those have actually been in Baton Rouge. We were able to beat LSU. I believe one of those was a while back in maybe 2015, but I think it may have been the game that Brett Bielema had where we shut out the Tigers. I don't remember for certain, but the most recent win was actually in 2021 where Garrett Nussmeier started, which is crazy that he's still playing college football. In that 9-4 Pittman season where we were able to get a Cam Little walk-off field goal to win. I don't anticipate something like that happening, but that is our most recent matchup, and that was in Death Valley against Nussmeier. And I believe that was the last time. I mean, we play him every other year in Baton Rouge, but the last time we played him in Baton Rouge would have been 2023, and Jaden Daniels, I believe, would have been the quarterback. So the last time we played Nussmeier in Baton Rouge, we were able to win. We'll see if that's what happens. But I would think, right, 2024 was Jaden Daniels' NFL draft. Yeah, so that would be the case. And then one thing I noticed too that was just crazy, in these last 10 matchups, we've only scored more than 17 points 4 times. So 40% of the time we score more than 17 points. So we've been very unproductive against LSU in the last 10 matchups on the offensive side of the football. So it leads me into what I've been doing. I've kind of changed it up throughout the year, but just the players to watch, most important, Hogs. I'm just doing one this week because I think I've gotten redundant with just a lot of the same players. And this week, I'm giving it to running back Mike Washington Jr. on the offensive side of the football. He's a guy that's led us in rushing far and away, especially from the running back position. He's a guy with 828 yards on the ground, 127 carries. Braylon Russell's had about 55 yards and only has 286 yards on the ground. So Washington's going to be really important. And as I mentioned earlier, LSU's weak spot, if anything, is their run defense. So we're going to need him to take advantage of that and also be kind of a player in the passing game. He's our seventh leading receiver in terms of yards with 151 yards out of the running back position. So just him as a pass catcher, but also him primarily as a runner. We're going to really need him this weekend. On the defensive side of the football, linebacker Xavier Story Jr. And I've put him in here a lot, despite really a pretty unproductive season. I think as a guy who I don't know if he would have been drafted if he came out last year, but he was a third-team All-SEC player, and I'm sure coming back he anticipated a more productive season than what he's given him so far. He's not been very good for him this year. But I anticipate him to be at least a spot where he's going to have to be valuable for us. This is a team that struggles in the run game, and he's not the most sound tackler, so I think it's going to be his advantage. And then from a passing perspective, he's going to be a guy that's going to be asked to play coverage snaps as well as a linebacker. And let's see what he can do with either Nussmeier, who's going to throw a lot of stuff the in between the hashes and throw over the middle, which is where Story's going to be, or Van Buren, who has the ability to run with his legs, and Story's going to be called a tackle. So he's in a spot where we're going to have him play a pretty impressive game, which I wouldn't say he's done this year. I mean, I'm not, fully educated on linebacker play, so I can't speak to it all the time. But I will say, as a fan watching and what I've seen, Story just hasn't been as good this year, and I think a lot of people would agree with that. So now it comes time for my prediction. Right now, LSU is a 5.5 point favorite against the Hogs this weekend. It's obviously in Baton Rouge, which is going to, really affect the line here. Right now, the over/under is at 55.5. I had it 56.5 when I was looking at my notes. I mentioned it earlier. We haven't scored more than 17, but in 4 of our last 10 matchups, I think we do that here. I think we can score 20 points is what I'm predicting. Both of our 2 wins over the last 10 matchups have been in Baton Rouge. I don't believe that's going to be happening this weekend. I also mentioned, too, that LSU has only scored more than 25 points once this year, and it was against an FCS opponent. But I do think they trump that this weekend. I think they'll score 31. So ultimately, I have us losing 31-20. I think this will be an under game. I think Arkansas and LSU, I don't think we're going to have necessarily a very impressive defense, but I think with this back and forth of is it Nussmeier, is it Van Buren, what they're doing with a 2-quarterback system for this upcoming week, I just don't think it's going to result in as many points as they possibly could. But at the same time, I'm predicting them to have their FBS high this week. So, it is what it is. 20 points would be very underwhelming for the Hogs, but LSU is a pretty good defense. If you look at them this year, the amount of games where they've given up more than 20 points, 3. And they were all losses. 2 of them were on the road. And then one of them against the 3rd team in the country in Texas A&M. So we're known for putting up points. We've actually put up a lot of impressive outings against teams that are considered top 25 teams, if that includes Ole Miss, Tennessee, several different teams that we've really given them their best and really had them on their heels of the defense. Even at Texas A&M, we scored 42 against Texas A&M. So this one, though, being on the road, I think is going to be a real difference maker. And I really think that LSU wanted their bounce back game to be against Alabama post Kelly's fire. I think it's really probably going to be this game, it being the first game for the fans since Kelly's been fired in Death Valley. But it is a morning kick, and Death Valley at night is really, to me, obviously more intimidating than it could be in the morning. So maybe we still have a shot, but I think LSU covers. It's an under, and LSU ultimately wins 31-20.